Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live. The digital revolution is in full swing. It's changing every part of our personal lives, our business lives, all the spaces in between, if there are even any spaces in between the personal and professional. And we've got today as one of our guests, one of our favorite monthly digital all-stars, Christopher Lochhead. Christopher is a best-selling author, podcaster. He's been a CMO at various Silicon Valley success stories. He's a big thinker, a little bit of a nut. He's a surfer, other things we've missed in the last few months. And Christopher, it is fantastic to have you back. Welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Love you. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me back.
Chris, I know a minute ago, the Beaner was walking around. Any chance we'll see the big fella?
Very likely. I think he might have saw a bird or something, but he generally at very unexpected times, he just jumps up on my desk and sticks his butt right in the camera or something along those lines.
And Chris, I know last time we talked, you were talking about the whole different, a new category of human beings, the digital natives. Would Bean qualify as a new category of cat? Because, right, he believes he's a dog. Isn't that right?
Yes. Well, as you know, there's been a breakthrough in diversity, inclusion, self-acceptance, self-expression, and the like. And so Bean looks like a cat, but he identifies as a dog.
Can I ask, when you go to the store for food, sustenance for the Beaner, dog food, cat food?
He likes both, but he tends a little more to cat food. So he's really sort of, he's kind of an in-betweener.
Okay.
But very dog-like. Always fun to take him out on walks. We walk him on a leash and walk, he walks for some of it. I carry him for a lot of it. But yes, I do take him to the store with me. When we first got him, he's about 1.5 years old now, but when we first got him, he was so dog-like as a puppy that I just said, all right, listen, if you're a fucking dog, I'm going to treat you like a dog. And so he goes in the car with me. And even in the car, it's funny, whenever I have him in public, it causes a stir. And even in the car, people are not used to seeing a cat in the car outside of a, carrier or whatever. And he'll like be on my lap and he'll poke his head out the window at a stoplight or whatever. And people are like, there's a cat in the car. Or sometimes he likes to lay on the dash, in between the dash and the windshield, and he's kind of long because he's part Maine Coon. So he's sort of a bigger dude and particularly long. And he sort of looks like some kind of a wicked rug or something on the dash.
Well, like you said, he's a bit of a crossover there, Chris, and a little
he's
bit
different.
But I think, Chris, thank you for the little sidebar there on Bean and what's going on. But I think one of the aspects of your outlook on things that everybody enjoys so much and why you've done so well as an author and a podcaster and a thinker is you tend to look at the sorts of things that most of us look at. We see one thing, you often see something from a different angle, a different approach. So it's always fun to get your perspectives on things. They're unique, they're compelling. And I know a couple times from the first time I've heard you say stuff, I said, well, okay, that's it. My he's gone off the rails. This is really nuts. But generally, time proves that you're right on the mark with this stuff. So wondering what you have for us today, Chris.
Well, a number of topics. So obviously we just came through the holiday season, right? And one of the hallmarks of the holiday season, of course, is virtually every B2C company in the world puts on a big sale. Not all, of course, but a lot. And of course, particularly here in the United States, we've been trained by retailers to wait for this thing called Black Friday, right after Thanksgiving. And so if you were thinking, I don't know, maybe it was September and maybe you were thinking about a new mock turtleneck because maybe the collection was getting light and you thought maybe I need a couple new ones. And it was in September, certainly in October, you'd think, hey, wait a minute, maybe I should wait because they're going to go on sale on Black Friday. And then, of course, those of us in the technology industry, we had to come up with our own. So very smart, by the way, Cyber Monday, right? And so So here's the interesting thing about that. You talk about thinking differently. The entire B2C world, with some exceptions, but a huge percentage of it has literally taught the American consumer to wait for Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And some people do that for a few months in advance. That's not great for business. And it creates this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? But my understanding, and I'm not an expert on the B2C world like my buddy Eddie Yoon is, but as he shares with me, this all started because, of course, the B2C companies wanted to goose their numbers at the end of the year. And of course, in the holiday season, people are in the giving mood and Christmas gifts and turkeys and the like. And so it became this game of discount jump ball.
Yeah.
But in so doing, they taught all the consumers to wait for this, which of course destroys their margins. Well, here's the aha. When you study it, as we have, and we wrote a whole category, Pirates, on this, discounting doesn't really work. I mean, it works to move TVs for sure. All you got to do is look at all the idiots going to a Best Buy on Black Friday, getting into fights. It looks like a scene from Gladiator or Road Warrior or something. So it works to move product. But here's the aha that most people missed. In America, we ran a 10-year experiment called Can Big Discounting Work? And we proved it can't. That experiment is a company called Groupon. And if you remember, there was a moment in time, roughly a decade or so ago, where Groupon was the hottest company, certainly in America and maybe even beyond. Google offered to buy them for $6 billion back when $6 billion was money. $6 billion now, not so much. They didn't take it. That one's kind of right up there with not selling Yahoo to Microsoft for me. That was like, ooh, bad idea. Because here's what happened, of course. All these small businesses, the small entrepreneurs, the ones that I have a very, very big place in my heart for, our local pizza shops, our local merchants, all the local restaurants that we love, the boutiques, the nail salons and hair salons, and all these places, right? Physiotherapists and gyms, and you name it, all did Groupons. And in the beginning, it was great. Oh my God, there's 1 million people here to get our shit, right? But as people continued to do these Groupons, what they found out was the customers sucked. And so the Groupon customers, if you had a salon of some kind, a restaurant of some kind, a gym of some kind, et cetera, the customer acquisition you got from Groupon were literally the shittiest customers of all time. And a huge percentage of small entrepreneurs said, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And so 10 years later, the company had a market cap of 13 billion at its IPO. It's under $1 billion now. Well, here's the aha. Groupon is Black Friday all year long. You can have Black Friday any day you want. So we tried this for 10 years. It became very clear that, with some exceptions, of course, no hard and fast rules, but for the most part, the buyers that are only interested in a deal are not buyers a lot of companies want. Some companies do, but Groupon is basically irrelevant today and is no longer considered a meaningful channel for small entrepreneurs because the customers that it got them sucked and they didn't want those customers. And so I find it fascinating that we continue to do Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And my brother from another mother, my partner in Category Pirates, Eddie Yoon, he wrote an incredible book that I really wish everybody would read called Super Consumers. And the insight is deceptively simple. But the insight is roughly 10% of customers in the category, not 10% of your customers in the category, drive the category and represent sometimes over 70% of the profits. And so 70%
of profits.
Correct. And he's a HBR guy and, Super Consumers is published by Harvard Press. The spreadsheet, he's a fucking spreadsheet Jedi master, right? It's so fun having a data meister around at all times. Like, hey, Eddie, go figure this out. And he comes back with this incredible shit. Anyways, and so the aha here is that all categories and therefore all companies are really a function of their ability to cultivate long-term relationships as measured by LTV, lifetime value, with super consumers. And so when you realize that, you realize that this mass discounting is pure insanity. And yet we continue to do it. And so it's just this fascinating thing that the data is very, very clear. Mass discounting and couponing is not good for business. It's good for clearing shit, but it's not good for long-term value of your business and building long-term value and relationships with customers. And yet, like a bunch of zombies, we just go off and do it. We just can't help ourselves, right? The board, if you're the CEO, you said, listen, we're not doing Black Friday anymore. We're not doing discounting anymore. They're like, you're not the CEO anymore, right? That we are so hypnotized by this thing that we've now taught every consumer in the world to wait for the discount. And if we said, hey, listen, we're going to give you legendary prices all the time, and there is no discount, which is a strategy many companies have adopted to be on the other side of it, that treats the customer fairly. See, the truth is, when you give these big discounts, what it says to the customers, you've been ripping me off all year, and now you're going to, be kind to me. Go fuck yourself, right? As opposed to the company that says, we're never going to rip you off. We're going to make a healthy profit because we need to be a successful business, but we're going to do it at a fair price. And that's what it's going to be. And that's are different. And so anyway, I guess my point is, A, the data is clear. It doesn't work. It doesn't cultivate super consumers. The obvious evidence is Groupon. The real strategy is building super consumers and lifetime value with those super consumers. And yet every year, companies put on their suicide outfits and like a bunch of lemmings jump off cliffs.
Chris, as you were saying that toward the end there, I thought of that, was it General Motors? Didn't they do a spin out like 25, 30 years ago, Saturn? And the big thing about Saturn was, hey, fixed price. We don't hassle the price on the window of the car. That's it. And it was like, okay, that's good. That's a little different. But if the cars are crappy, what have we gained here?
That was the problem. Remember, they differentiated on experience. The whole dealership would come out and they'd put bows on it and they would clap and they'd sing a song, or I don't know what they do, right? They were fun and they made buying a car fun and zany, right? A little bit the way Southwest does. But to your point, they were sort of rust buckets. And the interesting thing today, of course, is if you look at the two companies that you would argue matter the most in what many now are calling the mobility space, Tesla and Rivian, and both companies fixed price. Both companies, no dealers. And in Rivian's case, not even corporate dealers. So you can't, the only place you can buy a Rivian is at Rivian.com. Whereas, of course, Tesla has their own dealers. And actually, I read this the other day. You saw Elon, of course, move the company to Texas. Yeah. Oh, my exes are moving to Texas. And the fascinating thing about that, Texas has a law preventing car companies from selling direct. So you can't buy a fucking Tesla in Texas. But I digress. Pardon me?
Yeah. Because I'd always heard about this law. I didn't know if it was a federal law from 100 years ago, but that the car companies had to sell through dealers. And I thought, okay, that's a heavy duty lobbying effort or something like that. But today, who was it? A guy, you probably know him, Chris, but Frank Slootman from Snowflake, in their last earnings call, he talked at great length. It was a major theme that he kept coming back to throughout the earnings call. He said, every company in the world, whether you're in the old fashioned B2B or B2C space, every company in the world is going direct to consumer. And to do that, you need to have a data capability, unlike what they've had before. So he said, that is the thing that's driving our success. So, wildly different perspective on this. But I think what I was really struck by what you said a couple minutes ago with Groupon and all that, right? How you go from being the hottest company in the world, but eventually any business will show its true colors. And what they showed there was that we will gather for you, the businesses who buy our stuff, we'll gather for you the crappiest customers for you. And when you said that the consumers sucked, that's a tough realization, but that's what they played that game, right?
Yeah, and it's for all practice. I mean, look, there's some people that are using it, but it's a mega niche, and it's no longer relevant, really. And I would agree with Frank. I don't know that every company is going to be B2C, but a lot of them are. And here's what I do know: if you need government protection for your category, that is to say, car dealers, to exist, you're in a lot of trouble. And my dear friend, Kevin Maney, author of many legendary books, we worked together, of course, on Play Bigger. We wrote it together with two other guys. He was on my podcast recently, and one of the things he was talking about was the disappearance of all friction. Mm-hmm. And at one point in the .com era, we were talking about this word disintermediation. Uh-huh. You don't hear that word anymore, but the reality is there's more disintermediation happening right now than there ever was in the 90s. And so, look, it's been clear to many of us for a long time, when you are one click away from the greatest company in any category, anywhere in the world, all of a sudden, category economics change radically, and customer and or consumer behavior changes radically. And when time and space are more irrelevant now than ever before, and more layers in between people who actually want to do business together are stripped than ever before, I think that's part of why we're having the innovation and category NATO that we're now having.
Yeah. So Chris, tell us a little bit more about that, Kevin's idea about the friction-free.
Well, actually, hold on. Let me see if I can grab this right here. So this is a few months ago now, but this is a copy of the Atlantic magazine. Uh-huh. And on the cover of it, it says, "Who Killed America's Newspapers?" And the whole article is about what's happening in your old space. And in this case, a buyout firm that's been buying a lot of them. But one of the things that Kevin is educating me on is that over half of local newspapers are gone, and the other half, they're picking out caskets. Yeah. And the reason for it is simple, and I'll share with you. This is his story, not mine. As a young man, he wanted to be a journalist, a writer, a reporter. And he had a penchant for business. He had written some stuff about IBM. Today he's actually considered IBM's historian. He wrote the defining history of IBM. Anyway, long story longer, he got a job at the local newspaper in upstate New York where he lived. Well, that newspaper doesn't exist anymore. And the reason, and he said at the time, the reason people read those newspapers was it came out immediately. Some towns, like my town where I grew up, had a morning and an evening paper. And if you wanted to read, say, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, or sort of a, big Mac Daddy, mega category leading newspaper, you would get 2 days ago's Wall Street Journal or New York Times. So the reality is, the reason his bum squat New York paper was successful was simply access and distribution. Well, now, of course, we consume the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, or, I still like stuff like this, but most of the stuff I do both, right? And I go back and forth between the digital version and the print version. And many of us, of course, only choose to experience the digital version. So his point was, when you have access to the number one brands in any category you want digitally, and even if it's an analog product, we live in this next day, and in some cases, same day world from a delivery perspective. there's sort of very little reason for the bum squat news. So the bum squat news turns into a small or local, we have one here in Santa Cruz, website only that does a wonderful job of covering local things of interest. It's more magazine-y and less newsy, but somewhere in between. And it's called Lookout Santa Cruz, and it's fantastic. We still have an old paper. It's garbage. But the point being, when you can subscribe to whatever you want, this need for something that's local dissipates. Well, that's happening everywhere. And so we live in a world where geography matters less every day. And so when we talk about the supply chain, when we talk about distribution, we have to look at things and say, well, why does this distribution channel exist? And in the car business, it's now been proven by Tesla and Rivian that car dealers, as we've known them, are essentially stupid. And they've been rendered mostly useless. And so, you know, raise your hand if you love going to buy a car. I mean, it's like a hockey puck to the nuts. And so, so these businesses that exist because of distribution or geography, or in the case of car dealers, because of government regs, that's not going to be true for very much longer.
Chris, that's a fascinating look back at things. I want to take a moment here to offer a word from our sponsor, BMC. BMC wants to know, is your business on its A game? That's when systems are intelligent by learning from markets, where automation is paramount yet effortless, and when technology and people work as one in an enterprise. The A game is your business at its absolute best. BMC calls this the autonomous digital enterprise. Find out more at bmc.com/A-game. So, Christopher, what you had a couple other, as you always do, interesting thoughts to share.
Yeah. So there's been a really big breakthrough that's happened in what today a lot of people are calling Web3, which I don't know is a very great term. It's a very, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. The category name kind of sucks, but that's neither here nor there. And most people identify it as a sort of a combination of blockchain. Essentially, anything that's built on the blockchain, for the most part, is considered Web3. Of course, cryptocurrencies being the most prominent use, but there's now many, many others. And the Web3 Foundation describes Web 3.0 as, quote, a decentralized and fair internet where users control their own data, identity, and destiny. And so the interesting thing about some of these high-level ideas, it reminds me of the more idealistic, hippie, sort of informed Steve Jobs-esque days of Silicon Valley, where it was about changing the world and making a difference. And interestingly, over time, of course, as our industry has become a mega industry, there's mega money in it. There's a lot of media influence. So a lot of the companies today we call tech companies actually sell advertising. So that's much more of a media company. Yes, they use tech by all means. But when you sell ads, that's very different than, you know, for example, your friend Larry selling databases. And so there was a professionalization, a sort of a growing up and a mediaization, if I could call it that, of the tech industry over time. And some of the idealistic do good in the world hippie stuff went away, and it was all about show me the money. And you sort of look at the idealistic differences between a Jobs and a Zuckerberg, and it's very clear. Anyway, interestingly enough, the Web3 folks, a lot of them, of course, are native digitals, that is to say 35 and under. And they're almost wanting to bring back this sort of more idealistic, decentralized, empower the individual. Even the category of personal computers in the beginning, the point of view was all about empowering the individual. And so I think that's an interesting side note. However, what I would say is if if anybody in our industry hasn't fallen deep into the Web3 rabbit hole yet, now's the time. And here's the data. The Wall Street Journal just reported the following. Blockchain venture investments, 2018, 4.7 billion. 2019, it actually goes down to 3.1 billion, stays flat in 2020, 3.1 billion. And I don't know why this isn't being reported widely. In 2021, venture investors invested 15 billion into Web3/blockchain. And so now everybody into the pool. And I know there's a lot of poo-pooing of this shit. There's a lot of this is stupid. There's a lot of NFTs or who would pay 25 million for a GIF, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's now time to not think that way, I think. It's now time to pay some serious attention. And I don't know if Web3 will land in the direction it's landing. I don't know if it'll do. I'm not espousing some particular point of view about the stack or any of that. But what I am saying is that now is the time to pay close attention. There's lots of other sort of big indicators. Sequoia Capital, arguably in the top 3 ever venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, Oracle, Cisco, Apple. I mean, it's at Google. I mean, it's an insane list. Bloomberg just did a big story in the last few days about they've sort of been stair-stepping up into it, and they've gotten really serious over time. They have several partners focused on it. They made 21 Web3 investments in 2021, representing a quarter of all of Sequoia's investments, according to a story in Bloomberg. Sequoia, and I think this is true of others, I think Andreessen Horowitz has been doing this as well, have, if they're not officially lobbyists, they're real close to it, helping to educate our folks in Washington, because I don't know if you've ever heard a congressperson or a senator talk about any of this stuff. It's fucking terrifying.
I try never to listen to those people on any subject. I
heard Amy Klobuchar talking about what needs to happen in tech. And when you can't even pronounce the names of the companies, like it's just, some of these people still have their admins print out their emails. I mean, and then they Xerox things. I mean, it's like, it is insane to me. And the other thing too, this is just a side note, how the fuck can you have lawmakers making laws about the future of technology when, in point of fact, almost none of them are native digital? Yeah. But I digress. We could talk a lot about Washington. The point being, you now have Andreessen Horowitz, who's been very early on this stuff. They made their first investment in this area in a company called Coinbase in 2013. Andreessen Horowitz just announced that they had a $2.2 billion crypto fund earlier this year. And interestingly enough, one of their lead partners, a gal named Katie Hahn, left to create her own Web3 fund. So just the point being, it is very unusual in our industry to see for multiple years investments relatively in the same neighborhood, for 3 to 4 billion, go to 15 billion. And I'm not a prognosticator or an analyst in that way. I don't have a crystal ball, but my suspicion is that 15 billion number will be meaningfully bigger in 2022. I think we're starting to see exponential because it's starting to get clearer and clearer what the possibility of Web3 might be. And so really what I just wanted to underscore is this shit is real. Christie's last year sold $150 million in NFTs, AKA digital art. And I remember when we Category Pirates wrote about NFTs in the beginning of 2021, people laughed at us. We got emails calling us, stupid and all this other stuff. This year, 2021, was the breakout year for NFT sales, $12 billion. Wow. According to Business Insider. And then there's this site called payments.com who did a survey and said nearly 1 in 5 Americans, or roughly 46 million consumers, said they are likely to make a purchase with cryptocurrency. So still early days, but it's time. If we haven't been paying attention, it's time to pay close attention.
Yeah, Chris, couple thoughts there. One, we've, whatever it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, we did the web 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. So I think it's great that somebody's sort of bringing this Web3 up just as sort of a rallying point. Say, hey, there's something going on here. It's very different than what it has been like before. Let's pay attention. So I suspect that Web3 name will get blown out pretty quickly for something that's a little more tangible and significant and relevant. But the thing itself is great. We've got, the new company that I mentioned to you. We've got some called the blockchain Battleground coming up in March. One of the people on our board of directors, his name is Jason Yanowitz, 29 years old. He's the co-founder, CEO of a company called Blockworks. And they have just done newsletters and events all around this whole, they cover the crypto side, whereas we'd be looking at it from the blockchain enterprise side. But, some of the stories that Jason tells about what's going on there and the almost like it's not a straight line. He said it's almost straight up the number of big consumer companies, the number of big tech companies, these enterprise companies that are really starting to see this is not crazy. And it's not just not crazy. This is something that, as you said, better have the spidey sense, wide awake for this one, because it's going to have profound implications.
Absolutely, Bob. And I'm reminded of legendary venture capitalist John Doerr at sort of the height of the .com era said something along the lines of he thought that the internet was actually underhyped. And many people laughed at him. And of course, nobody's laughing now. And look, I'm not an expert. I'm not saying this is true, but here's what I do know. Assuming that Web3 blockchain et al. Is not a massive game-changing innovation is a dumb idea right now. It might not be, but I'm almost wondering if John's words about the internet are now on the verge of becoming true about Web3, that actually it might be underhyped. The other thing I'd tell you is smart people have shared with me, and it's an interesting idea, that in order to produce a massive technological breakthrough in society, or any breakthrough in society, really, you have to have a bubble. You have to have an exponential thing that moves the world from the way it is to a different way. And so even though, for example, there was the .com and then there was the .bomb, and the real estate, and boom, and now we're in another real estate, and on and on and on. And so part of why you have these booms and busts is when a new model, a new era of thinking in society, equal rights or whatever it is. If you look at what's happened ever since the killing of George Floyd, and think, you need a dramatic exponential event in order to kind of make the breakthrough happen. Invariably, it will feel overhyped. There will be some kind of a takedown. But if you realize that most people overestimate what's possible in the near term and underestimate what's possible in the long term. We had Marty Cooper on my podcast recently, the inventor of the cell phone. The cell phones lifted over 1 billion people out of poverty. He didn't know that was going to happen in 1970, whatever, or 80, whatever. Anyway, so I think we're at the beginning of that. I think we all need to be paying attention. And I think there's massive opportunity and, like anything like this, massive threat. And now's the time to get educated.
Chris, what's your sense just on that of, there's more information, more data, more access to information, more tools, more awareness of the power of technology. Are you surprised either one way or the other about the sort of the uptake on this new idea?
Not really, because we did a set of analysis for my first book around how long it takes for a category to develop. I could walk you through how we got to this place in the data, but essentially the data showed us that it takes roughly 6 to 10 years for a new category to tip at some kind of a scale. And we did that by measuring growth and value of companies, assuming that as companies got more valuable, either private companies or public companies, that would be indicative of category value being created. And so, you know, there's this sort of little bit of a stair step up. There can be a stalling like we saw in these numbers. And then when the jump happens, it's game on. And so, you know, if you think back to, people have been talking about these ideas for well over a decade. So it's maybe happened a little slower than some would have thought or some would have liked, but it's on now. And I mean, you see big movements happening. I mean, this is a huge part of why Jack Dorsey said he left, and he's now focused on his new company, Square, which he renamed, of course, Block, and he's all about it. And of course, you can, you know, you can buy a Tesla with cryptocurrency, and on and on and on, right? There's just, so the sort of some of the more forward zany billionaires are tilting heavy in this direction. And so all indicators are there. And yet outside of what I'd call Silicon Valley and deep tech, in the general kind of, for lack of a better description, enterprise world, business world, I think a lot of people kind of go, and this, you know, this made up currency. Not realizing, of course, that the US dollar is a completely made up currency. And so I think there's been some poo-pooing going on. The fact that you can't call Morgan Stanley and trade crypto is insane. And the fact that a lot of companies in their IT organizations aren't doing major experiments with new blockchain applications is kind of insane. And so I think it's time to start, for those who have not been paying attention, it's time to start paying attention. And I would highly encourage going deep into the rabbit hole and suspending some skepticism and just go into learning mode.
Hey, Chris, great advice, I think, for everybody. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask your thoughts on something. Did you see, I don't know, this is 2 or 3 weeks ago, but in partnership with AWS, Goldman Sachs announced the Goldman Sachs Cloud for data. I thought that was some 157-year-old, you know, sort of white shoe Wall Street investment firm, and now they're in the cloud business. I thought that is a sign of something, and to me, a little bit like it goes in this direction of what you're saying about crypto, that, you know, we, for whatever reason, seem to think, hey, there's been all this tumultuous change that's happened before, but now nothing else is going to change. Things will settle down. Things will just stay the way they are. It's crazy. So Goldman Sachs in the cloud business, I think, in a roundabout way, is a prover of the crypto thing. It's a whole new
I completely agree. And the other thing that is smart is Goldman must understand, in the domain of things that are underhyped, and I know this is going to sound crazy, data is underhyped.
Yes.
And there's actually a very interesting correlation between data and the discussion we had about Slootman's comments on everybody going B2C, which is, at least from a growth perspective, data about super consumers is the most valuable data. I'm not talking about research data or R&D. I'm not talking about those things. But in terms of, if you want to understand where your category might likely be going, then data on your supers really matters. And this direct model is incredible. You know, even ourselves at Category Pirates, we have completely given the middle finger to the traditional publishing world. And one of the values of that, and specifically having a Substack in our case, is we have data on who our supers are. Because as you've subscribed to our Substack, by definition, you're a super. Unfortunately, when we sell our content on Amazon as books, as we do, Amazon doesn't tell us anything about our customers, because Amazon says they're their customers. Right. And so if you're a creator, you know, in our case, podcasting and writing and all that kind of stuff, and very similar to the kinds of, many of the kinds of things that you do, if, again, your distribution channel is not giving you data on consumers, you have a strategic problem that you need to fix AS fucking AP. And so I think what this is an acknowledgement of is the value of data to understand where super consumers are. Of course, there's many other different use case values of data that we don't necessarily need to talk about, but B2C data about super consumers. If you don't have that, we think you're now at a point where it's almost impossible to become a category leader if you don't have that kind of a data flywheel about super consumers that are driving the category.
Christopher, great stuff. I missed you dearly over these last few months when schedules were not aligning. It's fantastic to get back together, and we're doing this episode on December 21st. It'll probably come out in early January, but may I say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and yours.
You too. And can I touch on one thing before you kick me out the door?
Please, please.
So I think given everything we just talked about, I think now is the time to start thinking about thinking. So first, I think we all have to understand what's happened with native digitals and native analogs. It's the largest change in the definition of what a human being is probably ever. Native digitals grew up integrated with the technology. It's interesting. Parents who quote unquote limit screen time, you're taking your children out of their primary experience of life when you do that, because the analog experience is secondary. So I think that has profound ramifications that most people don't understand. I'll give you a simple example. This word, digital transformation, or this phrase, I think we need to not say that anymore.
I agree.
Because you can't create the future looking backwards. And by definition, a transformation is taking something the way it is and transforming it into a new way. Web3 is not that. Web3 is about digital creation, is not reimagining, but imagining. And so I think to be successful in 2022 and beyond, thinking about thinking is the most important kind of thinking. I think if you're a native analog, as you and I are, I'll tell you the advice I've been trying to take. I start with reject the premise. So whatever the conversation is, I reject whatever the old premise is. I may come back to that premise, but in order to think in an unconstrained way, you have to say everything about the way that it is, fuck that, that's wrong. And if you're a native analog, I think it also means distrust your instincts. You may go back to them, but the only way to really know whether you're standing on solid ground is to distrust your instincts and reject the premise, stand in a curious mind space, not in a judgmental mind space, and soak up some stuff. Think digital creation, not digital transformation. There's another big aha here from our friend Andrew Smallwood. He put it beautifully. Native analogs buy analog things digitally. Native digitals buy digital things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is the essence of this. And so what I would encourage folks to do is we have this kind of this approach we call the breakthrough game, is to play the breakthrough game. Imagine yourself 5 years in the future. Think in a completely unconstrained way that is informed by all of these kinds of things we're talking about. And say, if the world could be any way, what might the world be? And so that allows us to freely participate in a different future, because the future that is coming is not an extension of the past. And most people are betting that the future is an extension of the past. And what we're seeing with the jump in the VC here is a bet that the future will be different. And so I think the more curious we can be, the more open we can be, the more non-judgmental we can be. And I'll just tell you what I've done, which is I surround myself with legendary native digitals. I started a business this year with one of them. And so I would encourage particularly native analogs to jump in with both feet in that regard. And with native digitals, there's a huge value to experience. There's a huge value to pattern recognition. You know, the things look and feel different, but you and I have been through massive technology innovation and category natives before, right? So the value of a native analog to a native digital, if they can find that place to meet where experience and modernity collide to make something legendary, I think that's what we're striving for in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, yeah. Chris, you're maybe a theme song for that thing of, rejecting the premise out of hand, the Groucho Marx song, whatever it is. How does he sing that song? Whatever it is, I reject it. No matter who dreamed it up or who commenced it, I reject it. It's a great song. I'll send you the link for that. I think
please do.
Fun with that. Now, he's a little bit of the old school, but he's coming back around. He had the right idea, but about 90 years too early.
History matters.
It does. It does. Well, my friend, thank you. That closing call to action, I think call to arms by you was wonderful. It's, I think, something that everybody should carry forward into 2022 and be curious, right? Otherwise, we set ourselves up for disappointment, disillusionment, and I just think this is a great and wonderful world. And why go through it, with your eyes half shut and your mind half shut? That's a bad way to live.
Particularly when we know, those of us who've been in the technology industry, there can be no argument in my mind that right now is the most innovative, the most exciting, the most category creating that we've ever had. And it's been talked about a lot, so we don't have to talk about it much, but there's been many gifts out of this horrible disease, right? In terms of people's openness to new. Nobody thought you could do telemedicine overnight or digital school overnight or digital work overnight, of course. So the other interesting thing is, as the technologies are breaking through at this moment now, receptivity to the different has never been higher. And if you're somebody who likes to create things and build things in the technology world, if you're not excited about that, get excited.
Yeah. Dummy. I'm just writing that down. Receptivity to different has never been higher. Well, that's great. Chris, those are words to live by, words to jump into 22 with. That's fantastic. Well, please give our best to Bean. We missed the big fellow today, but hope to catch him next time.
All right. And Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and bless you and all of yours.
Same to you, Chris. Thanks so much.
Thank you, brother.
All of you folks out there, thank you for being with us. I hope you enjoyed this sort of romp through the ranges of Chris Lochhead's intellect and outlook on things. Remember, receptivity to different has never been higher. It's a great thing, great way to look at the world going into 2022. Thanks so much for being with us. Happy New Year and a blessed holiday to everybody.